The sky split open on a Tuesday. 1,000 streaks of silver fire cut to the clouds above Earth's capitals. Washington, Beijing, Delhi, Nairobi, Paris. All in perfect, synchronized ascent. What followed was an invasion, at least not in the way history would have expected. There were no bombs, no declarations of war. Instead, they landed in silence, their ships gleaming with impossible geometry, humming with quiet superiority. The Xerenthians called it the offering. They were tall and iridescent, eyes like liquid mercury, and spoke in flawless, echoing English. They presented humanity with gifts, gleaming devices they referred to as sentinel rods. They looked like elongated prisms of metal and crystal, cool to the touch and humming with low energy. The aliens claimed these were tools for peace, relics of a wiser post-violent age. Weapons, yes, but reformed ones. Non-lethal, symbolic, light without destruction. One Xerenthian said with a smile that didn't quite reach its eyes. Some leaders praised them, some mistrusted. Most were simply confused. Captain Hilaire Voss stood at the edge of the Pentagon's private demonstration yard, arms crossed, watching as one of the rods was fired. It let out a sound like a breath and emitted a soft, blue pulse that knocked over a row of mannequins. They fell intact, not even singed. Her commanding officer turned to her, grinning. Impressive restraint, don't you think? Hilaire said nothing. Her eyes remained on the rod as it powered down with a melodic chime. She was young, but her reputation carried weight. Decorated in the Mars skirmishes, twice promoted for frontline ingenuity, and famously skeptical of anything wrapped in diplomacy and sparkles. Her uniform was immaculate, black and steel gray with a high collar and a single silver badge. Unified Defense Command. She didn't trust what she couldn't break apart. Dr. Malik stood beside her, thin and twitchy, muttering to himself while tapping at a pad that was clearly decades behind whatever alien tech they now had in front of them. Still registering anomalous spikes, he whispered. Energy fluctuations well beyond the weapon's visible output. There's something inside those rods they're not telling us. Hilaire raised an eyebrow. Meaning? He glanced at her nervously. They could be sleeping dragons. 3 days later, the rods were distributed worldwide. One to every major military, one to every global security council, a few to prestigious universities. The media exploded with theories. Protesters marched in the streets, some waving signs that said lay down the light, others demanding full integration of alien technology into Earth's arsenal. It wasn't war. Not yet. But the chessboard was clearly being set. Hilaire's unit, Spectre Division, was tasked with containment and analysis. The name alone showed how seriously or not the Pentagon took the mission. Spectre operated out of a buried base in Arizona, surrounded by sand, silence, and suspicion. They were given 6 rods and a lab that looked more like a dissected museum. On day 5, one rod emitted a sound when no one touched it. Just a faint musical tone, almost human. Everyone froze. No one could replicate it. On day 8, it responded to a spoken phrase. One of the engineers had jokingly said, "Let's see what you've got." And the rod had glowed bright white for a heartbeat. By day 10, Hilaire had seen enough. She stood in front of the command briefing room and addressed her team with calm intensity. These weapons are locked, not useless. Locked. I don't believe the aliens gave us peace offerings. I think they gave us cages. Silence. Lieutenant Ayres, her second-in-command, frowned. You think they're planning to control us through tech that only they understand? No, she said. I think they're daring us to figure it out. Dr. Malik tapped at his tablet. I've been running frequency scans through the rod's crystal lattices. They're not static objects. They're layered. There are sequences in energy pulses like DNA, encrypted patterns waiting for something. A trigger. A code. Hilaire turned to him. Can you crack it? Eventually, he said, hesitant. But we need full spectrum amplification and... Do it. Quietly. If anyone outside this base finds out, we're shut down. Over the following week, the world's attention drifted. Without any obvious function or power, the rods were declared symbolic gifts of peace. Analysts shrugged. Talk shows mocked the whole affair. One late-night host called them alien party favors. Governments reallocated funds elsewhere. Most people moved on. Spectre Division did not. Late one night, Ilara stood alone in the testing chamber, facing one of the rods mounted on a pedestal. The lights were dim, the air static. She reached out, slowly, her gloved fingers brushing the surface. "Let's see what you've got," she whispered. The room brightened. The rod pulsed. Not just a flicker, but a rhythmic sequence, like a heartbeat waking from hibernation. A low hum filled the chamber. The rod lifted an inch from the pedestal and rotated once, slowly. Then it stopped. A final pulse. A tone, low and deliberate. Ilara stepped back. The lights went out. For 3 full seconds, the base was dark. When emergency power kicked in, the rod had returned to its resting position. Silent. Still. She didn't tell anyone that night. Not even Malik. The next morning, military trucks arrived unannounced. 4 men in black suits met with the base commander behind closed doors. Their badges were unreadable. One of them glanced at Ilara in passing. Flat eyes, expressionless. She didn't like it. Hours later, she received a new directive. Stand down all experiments. All active testing of alien weapons was to be suspended until further notice. The rods were to be sealed and stored. No explanations. No debate. Ilara read the order twice, handed it back to the messenger, and said nothing. That night, she met Malik in the comms room, where no cameras watched. "They know something," she said. "They all know something," he replied. "I think this was a plan. Give us weapons we couldn't use. Watch us waste resources trying, then swoop in once we get close to the truth. Control the narrative. Control the knowledge. They think it's over," she said. "They think we'll give up." He gave her a long look. "We won't, will we?" "No," she said. Outside the bunker, a dust storm howled across the Arizona desert. Inside, in the belly of Earth's most secret place, something ancient and alien pulsed gently on its pedestal, listening, waiting. Rain fell over Zurich in unnatural sheets, laced with static as if the sky itself were resisting what it knew was coming. Somewhere deep beneath the city's surface, in a subterranean vault lined with lead and lies, a meeting was taking place that had no record, no minutes, no names. The Xerenthian stood tall and motionless at the head of the chamber. 3 of them, dressed in shimmering robes that bent the light oddly, like oil over water. Across from them sat 7 humans, military brass, intelligence directors, a corporate magnate whose company had quietly absorbed nearly every contract involving alien tech assimilation. None of them spoke first. One of the aliens eventually broke the silence, its voice a vibrating hum that resonated inside their bones rather than ears. "They are beginning to understand." A grizzled general tapped a knuckle against the polished table. "The experiments have been ordered to stop. Containment is under control. No units outside Spectre Division show any signs of breakthrough. Yet Spectre persists," said another alien, turning slightly. "And the one called Ilara Voss. She is insistent. She's small-scale. Frustrating, yes, but manageable," muttered the intelligence chief. "We place a shadow handler inside the base. If she digs too deep, she'll be dealt with." The Xerenthians didn't nod. They didn't move. Still, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Humanity is not to awaken the Sentinels ahead of schedule," the lead one said. "If they do, your relevance ends." Back in Arizona, Ilara stared at her reflection in the locker mirror. Her face was calm, unreadable. But beneath that veneer, a storm brewed. She'd obeyed the stand-down order publicly. Privately, she and Malik had moved their research underground, literally, into a service tunnel beneath the primary lab, where surveillance was sparse and curiosity could still breathe. Malik sat cross-legged on the cold floor, surrounded by broken-down diagnostic tablets and copper coils scavenged from the original tech lab. The rod stood upright in front of him, now suspended in a field generated by 3 oscillating drones he'd modified with parts not even the Pentagon knew existed. "It's reacting again," he said without looking up. "Slightly, like it's checking in." "Checking in with what?" "Or who?" he muttered. She crouched beside him, narrowing her eyes at the glowing tip of the rod. The pulses had grown stronger since Zurich. Subtle at first, just a flicker in the dark, but unmistakable, rhythmic, intentional. They weren't malfunctions. They were communications. That night, Ayers knocked twice at her door and entered without waiting. He looked tired, soaked with the news he hadn't yet spoken. "We have a leak," he said. Her jaw tensed. "How bad?" "Worse than we thought. Someone's been quietly feeding our research logs up the chain, encrypted files, experimental data, visual captures of the resonance shifts. Not a data breach. Internal." "Who?" He hesitated. "Could be Greer. Greer's been with me 5 years. She doesn't break. Unless she never joined for the right reasons." Illyra stood, pulled her jacket on, and grabbed her sidearm. She didn't need orders. She'd always known this day would come. They had poked something powerful, something sacred, maybe, and now someone wanted to cut off their fingers. When they confronted Greer, she didn't lie. "You don't get it," she said, unblinking, as Illyra held her at gunpoint in the storage bay. "You think these rods are just tech. They're not. They're keys." "Keys to what?" Malik asked, standing beside Illyra. "To whatever comes next." Greer's expression shifted. Not fear, not regret. Conviction. They're not just gifts. They're validators. Humanity was being tested. And you were never meant to pass. She lunged for the nearest emergency lever, but Illyra was faster. One shot, clean and sharp, to the shoulder. Greer collapsed, blood spreading across the floor like ink. They didn't kill her. Not yet. In the hours that followed, Spectre's remaining members locked down every hallway. Secure doors hissed shut. Communications were cut from the outside. Illyra and Malik knew the reprieve wouldn't last. But it bought them time, just enough to finally do what the aliens feared most. Break the code. Malik sat in front of the rod, now humming so violently that lights in the tunnel flickered with each pulse. There's a fail-safe buried in the frequency layers. They didn't want us accessing it, but Greer's logs. She left them open, maybe deliberately. You think she wanted to be caught? No. I think she wanted us to know how close we were to the truth. He tapped a final command into his console. There's a trigger phrase, buried in the alien linguistics they used during first contact. I've reconstructed enough of it to try. Illyra glanced around. You do this, there's no going back. We're already too deep, he said. She nodded. Malik whispered the phrase. 4 alien syllables that didn't translate into any human language, but vibrated like thunder underwater. The rod exploded with light. Not a burst, not a flash. An eruption of layered geometries folding into themselves like living architecture. A tunnel of energy spiraled outward, illuminating the entire service chamber. Illyra staggered back, shielding her eyes as Malik gasped beside her. And then everything stopped. The rod hovered. Fully awakened now, humming not with idle potential but purpose. Its once muted design now gleamed with lines of script and etched circuitry, glowing with alien fire. Malik whispered, This isn't a weapon. It's a command interface." "For what?" "For everything." The floor shook, not from the rod, but from above. Sirens echoed through the ceiling. Boots thundered. Spectre Division was under full military incursion. "They're here," Ayers called through the comms. "Heavy squad, black gear, no insignia. They're not here to talk." Illyra looked at Malik, at the weapon now humming in her hand. "This changes everything," she said. Malik nodded. "It already has." She turned to the open tunnel, the glowing interface cradled in her grip. Behind her, footsteps descended like a drumbeat of inevitability. But for the first time since the offering, Illyra didn't feel like the hunted. She felt like the fuse. And the spark had just been lit. Illyra ran. The tunnels beneath Spectre Base weren't on any blueprint she'd ever seen. But instinct drove her, away from the collapsing lab, away from the sound of stun rounds punching into walls, away from the shouts of men who didn't wear her country's insignia. Behind her, Malik staggered, clutching the rod like a relic. It no longer hummed. It sang, a soft harmonic tone that made the walls resonate. The light around it didn't reflect so much as bend, warping into flowing bands that pulsed with awareness. Whatever they had awakened, It was no longer passive. "We need to get to the old hangar bay," Ilara shouted as they turned down a side passage. "There's a comms uplink in the subdeck there. If we can boost it, we can get out a signal." "Signal to who?" Malik panted, barely keeping up. "Anyone who'll listen." But even as she said it, she knew that was a lie. No one would listen. Not the governments. Not the military. Not the press. The moment she activated the rod, she stepped out of the known world and into a space where only power mattered. Truth had no flag. A flash ahead. Movement. Ilara ducked behind a crumbling support beam and drew her sidearm. 3 figures moved in from the far corridor. Black helmets, blank visors, sleek rifles trained with merciless precision. They weren't here for arrest. They were here for cleanup. She looked at Malik, who was breathing hard but nodded. He understood, without a word. She rolled out and fired. 1 shot, 2, then a third, center mass. The first guard fell. The second flinched back, and Malik tossed a makeshift flash charge made from a fusion coil and a cracked pulse cell. The corridor flared white. Screams followed. They sprinted past the bodies, one still twitching. Ilara didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. They reached the hangar bay 30 seconds later. It looked like a ruin, once a deployment point for VTOL craft, now stripped and abandoned. Dust coated the broken catwalks. The only light came from the rod itself. Ilara climbed to the uplink control console and powered it on. Static. Lines of old code blinked. Outdated but still functioning. She accessed a wideband frequency and patched through encryption layers no longer sanctioned by command. Her voice shook as she spoke into the mic. "This is Captain Ilara Voss, Spectre Division. We've been compromised. Internal breach. Hostile forces, unknown affiliation, have overtaken the base. The alien weapon has activated. Repeat, the rod is functional. This is not a symbol. It's a system." Static hissed. Then a click. "Ilara?" The voice cut through the noise. Deep, measured, familiar. She froze. "Director Salen? You shouldn't be speaking." The voice said. "You shouldn't be alive." Her heart stilled. Salen had been her handler for years. Calm, cold, brilliant. The one who'd backed her career even when others feared her instincts. The one who'd put her in charge of Spectre. "You knew," she whispered. "We all did. I trusted you. You were never meant to understand it. Just monitor it. Stall it." Ilara, clench your jaw. "You're working with them." "Of course I am. Do you really think Earth was offered those rods by accident? The Xerenthian selected you specifically. You and the others. They called it a gift, but it was always a litmus test. A sorting algorithm in disguise. You let them experiment on us. We're on the brink of extinction. Ilara. Climate collapse. Global instability. Nuclear proliferation. The rods aren't weapons. They're choices. Fail to unlock them, and we remain human. Unlock them, and we become relevant. You sold us. I saved us." The line went dead. Ilara stood motionless for a moment, her breath slow. Then she turned to Malik. "We send the message anyway. No encryption. No hiding. Broadcast it wide. They'll trace it in minutes. They'll have to chase it." Malik moved to the console and opened the relay. Data packets surged into the ether, raw footage of the rod activation, schematics of energy spikes, Greer's confession, the truth unpolished and undeniable. "They'll call it a hoax," Malik said softly. "Then we give them something they can't deny." Ilara looked at the rod and stepped forward. The symbols along its surface were no longer alien to her. Her fingers hovered over the lines, each one pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She pressed down. The room flickered. For an instant, reality twisted, as if the hangar folded inside itself and unfolded into something else entirely. A figure appeared. Not Xerenthian. Not human. It was tall, cloaked in light and static, its features undefined, like a silhouette remembered from a dream. But its presence was undeniable. It didn't speak with words. It resonated. Ilara staggered. Malik collapsed to one knee. The rod remained between them, Its light focused now like a lens, projecting this entity into the air. It showed her images. A war in the stars. Worlds lost to entropy. Civilizations that rose and fell around a single mistake, trusting their weapons more than their wisdom. And then it showed Earth, not as it was, but as it could be, transformed, elevated, unified under the technology not of conquest, but convergence. The rods were not meant to kill. They were seeds, each one capable of awakening an interface with this intelligence. The architect, Malik would later call it. But the vision didn't end there. It showed a second path. Earth, crumbling under fear. The rods locked away. Greer's prophecy fulfilled. Humanity reduced to factions, tearing themselves apart over a technology they never understood. Two paths, one choice, and then it was gone. Illyra gasped and staggered back, as if she'd held her breath for hours. Malik looked up, dazed but wide-eyed. "That wasn't alien," he whispered. "That was ancient." Footsteps again. Closer, angrier. Illyra grabbed the rod and turned toward the main bay doors, now shuddering under pressure. "Malik," she said. "Yeah, we're not running anymore." The doors burst open, and she stepped forward. The light from the rod flared again, refracting in sharp lines across the walls of the ruined hangar as the reinforced doors split open. The air pressure dropped. Cold metal screeched. Silhouettes poured through the breach. 8 in formation, armor head to toe, weapons raised, visors down. Not soldiers. Not human, at least not anymore. Illyra held the rod in front of her like a torch. Its radiance sliced through the shadows, warping reality at the edges. The lead enforcer raised a weapon, sleek, compact, humming with an energy that made the air sizzle. "Stand down." The figure barked through a filtered vocoder. The voice was human, but hollowed, stripped of identity. Illyra didn't move. Malik, beside her, gripped a scavenged sidearm, though he looked ready to fall apart. Blood stained his sleeve from a graze shot back in the tunnels. His breath came in shallow gasps, but his eyes stayed locked on her, trust unwavering. "I'm not standing down," Illyra said quietly, raising the rod higher. "You don't even know what this is." "It's a threat," the soldier replied. "No, it's a warning." Without hesitation, the lead soldier fired, but the shot never reached her. The rod pulsed midair, humming in a low harmonic frequency that shivered the walls, and the energy bolt stopped in motion, frozen, suspended inches from her chest. The light bent sharply around it, disintegrating it into nothing but harmless vapor. The attackers hesitated, not from fear, from calculation. "Return fire," the commander ordered. They didn't get the chance. Illyra twisted the rod, not like operating a weapon, but like asking for something. The floor beneath them lit up in a web of intersecting blue and gold circuitry, pulsing like veins beneath stone. Gravity shifted. The soldiers screamed as their boots lifted off the ground. Rifles pulled from their hands as if sucked into invisible tides. One slammed into the ceiling. Another vanished in a burst of warped air, sucked into a pocket of space that folded shut behind him. It was not violence. It was control. Malik stepped back, eyes wide. You're not just using it. It's using you." Illyra didn't answer. Her heart pounded, but her mind was calm. The architect's vision still echoed in her skull. Two futures held in tension, like a quantum state waiting to collapse. "Malik," she said slowly, "if we make it out of here, there's something we have to do." He looked at her, blood on his teeth but fire in his gaze. "Whatever it is, I'm in." Outside the hangar, the desert stretched quiet and dark under a fractured moon. They emerged from a maintenance exit as black drones circled overhead, scanning for thermal traces. The rod dimmed in her hand now, but only slightly. It was conserving power, or perhaps waiting for the next stage. They drove east in a stolen Humvee, silent save for the wind rushing through shattered windows. No chatter on the radio, no civilian broadcasts. A blackout. Illyra suspected Spectre Base had already been buried, literally and politically. The message she'd sent? Jammed, covered, but not deleted. Somewhere, someone had heard. When they reached the ridge overlooking the old Deep Sky Observatory, they stopped. Malik leaned against the hood, coughing. "This place was shut down years ago," he said. Elara nodded. "Because it was too accurate. It caught something once. A signal. A burst pattern, not from our solar system." He blinked. "You think the rod wants us to respond to it?" "I think we're supposed to finish the test," she said. The observatory was dark, but they forced entry. The systems inside were dusty but intact. She placed the rod in the core dish housing. It slid into place like it had always belonged there. And then it lit up. Panels snapped on. Arrays rotated with quiet mechanical groans. The signal output began to build, not in radio waves, but in something subtler, deeper, like a heartbeat being transmitted across dimensions. A low hum rose around them. The rod was sending something. Coordinates? A frequency? A message? And then a reply. Not in sound. In light. The stars outside began to move. No, not move. Align. Elara and Malik watched in awe as constellations shifted, seemingly impossible, and formed an unfamiliar pattern across the sky. It wasn't random. It was a symbol. The same one now glowing on the rod's surface. Malik's breath caught. That's not a reply. That's a confirmation. From a horizon, a second rod appeared, rising vertically out of the sand miles away, called up from beneath the earth like it had waited centuries for this moment. Then another, and another. A grid of ancient pylons unveiled themselves across the landscape. All had been buried, forgotten, hidden in plain sight. The weapons the Xerenthians had given humanity, they were never meant for war. They were pieces of a machine, a global interface, and Elara had just activated it. The ground rumbled. Wind howled. Across the planet, anyone near one of these rods would be seeing the same thing, watching impossible monuments rise from the earth, responding not to politics or armies, but to resonance, to truth. In the distance, aircraft scrambled, military interceptors, Black Ops transports, all racing toward them. Too late. The system was already online. Elara turned to Malik. "They'll try to kill us now. They've already failed." The rod lifted itself from the dish and hovered midair, humming louder than before. This time there was no vision, only understanding. A clarity that settled like dawn breaking across a battlefield. Humanity had been given a test not of intelligence or technology, but of intent. And though most had failed, a few had seen the truth. The system would not be controlled. It would be shared. Elara took Malik's hand, and they stepped forward into the light as a new age opened its eyes.